Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here today because we're diving into something truly extraordinary, a forgotten teaching from Edgar Cayce, one of the most remarkable spiritual visionaries of the 20th century. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you pray, no matter how many spiritual practices you follow, there's still something getting through your defenses? Like there's an invisible door left wide open that you just can't seem to close? You're not alone in this feeling. And what I'm about to share with you today might completely transform the way you approach spiritual protection. Now, here's something that might surprise you. The key to unbreakable spiritual defense has been with you since the moment you were born. It's not in a crystal you need to buy, not in a complicated ritual requiring special ingredients, and not even in words you need to memorize. It's actually located at a specific point on your body that most people walk past every single day without giving it a second thought. Your navel. I know what you might be thinking. The navel? Really? But stay with me here, because what Edgar Cayce discovered about this seemingly insignificant spot is nothing short of revolutionary. You see, Cayce wasn't just another spiritual teacher throwing around vague concepts. His readings were so accurate, so scientifically documented, that even medical professionals of his time were baffled by the precision of his insights. And when it came to spiritual protection, he pointed to something that ancient civilizations had known all along, but that we've somehow forgotten in our modern world. Think about it for a moment. Your navel is the first connection you ever had to another human being. It's the portal through which you received life itself. Oxygen, nutrients, everything you needed to exist flowed through that singular point. Has this ever occurred to you? That perhaps this channel, this bridge between worlds, didn't just shut down completely when the cord was cut? What if it remained active in ways we simply stopped paying attention to? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Cayce taught that this isn't just poetic thinking, it's spiritual science. He explained that certain prayers, when performed in a very specific way while touching your navel, create what he called an unbreakable field of protection. Not a temporary shield, not something that fades when your concentration wanders. An actual energetic boundary that negative forces simply cannot penetrate. And the most beautiful part? This wasn't complicated, esoteric knowledge reserved for spiritual masters. This was something anyone could do, anywhere, without any special training or equipment. But here's what makes this practice so different from everything else you've probably tried. It's not about the physical touch itself. Stay with me until the end, because this is crucial. What you're actually doing when you place your hand on your navel during prayer is activating something that's been dormant inside you, something that's been waiting patiently for you to remember it exists. It's like finding a light switch in a dark room you've been stumbling through your entire life. Now you might be wondering why you've never heard about this before, why this knowledge seems to have disappeared from mainstream spiritual teaching. The answer to that question reveals something profound about how spiritual wisdom gets lost through generations, and how sometimes the most powerful practices are the ones that the ancient wisdom traditions understood something that we've lost in our modern rush toward everything external and material. They recognized that the human body isn't just flesh and bone, isn't just a vehicle we happen to occupy for a few decades. It's a sacred temple, carefully designed with specific access points to the invisible realm. Every organ, every energy center, every seemingly insignificant mark on our skin has a purpose that goes far beyond the physical. And yet, we walk around completely unaware of the power we're carrying within us every single moment of every day. Here's where the real transformation in mindset begins. When Cayce spoke about the navel, he wasn't being metaphorical or symbolic. He was describing an actual energetic reality that ancient civilizations built entire spiritual practices around. Think about the hidden truth behind why so many cultures protected the navel area with special garments, amulets, or ceremonial markings. They weren't being superstitious or primitive. They understood something about the architecture of the human energy system that we've simply forgotten in our journey towards so-called progress. Your navel isn't just that small indentation at the center of your abdomen. It's not merely a scar marking where you were once connected to your mother. It's the very first portal through which you entered into relationship with physical existence. For 9 months, every single thing you needed to survive flowed through that singular channel. Every nutrient, every molecule of oxygen, every bit of life force that allowed you to grow from a few cells into a complete human being passed through that exact spot. And here's what most people never consider. When that umbilical cord was cut and you took your first independent breath, that channel didn't simply close and become irrelevant. The physical cord was severed, yes, but energetically, spiritually, that portal remained active. It continues pulsing with subtle vibrations that most of us have learned to ignore completely. We've been conditioned to think of our bodies in purely mechanical terms, like machines that need fuel and maintenance. But the impact of this limited perspective has cost us access to one of our most powerful natural defenses against negative energy. Cayce spoke about this point with a reverence that might seem unusual to modern ears, but he was echoing knowledge that goes back thousands of years. Ancient healers, mystics, and spiritual practitioners across completely different cultures somehow all arrived at the same understanding. The navel is a magnetic center. It's not passive, it's constantly working, constantly interacting with forces around you that you can't see with your physical eyes. This center is capable of both absorbing and repelling invisible influences, depending on whether you're conscious of it or not. And here's the part that might shift everything for you. Right now, as you're watching this, that magnetic center is operating. It's receiving signals, processing energy, responding to the emotional and spiritual atmosphere around you. The only question is whether it's working for you or against you. Most people go through their entire lives with this portal wide open, completely unguarded, absorbing every bit of negativity, fear, and density they encounter. The invisible realm doesn't stop working just because we've stopped paying attention. Those forces are still there, still active, still seeking entry points into your energy field. Now, I want to go even deeper into this because understanding the mechanics of this magnetic center is one thing, but knowing how to actually work with it, how to activate its protective capacity, that's where the real revelations begin. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to protect my energy," if this is resonating with you so far. What Cayce discovered about the specific way to engage with this point wasn't something he invented or made up. It was revealed to him through the spiritual guides who worked with him, these higher intelligences who understood the architecture of the human energy system in ways that completely transcend what we learn in medical textbooks or even most spiritual teachings. What they showed him was something so simple, yet so profound, that it's almost been hidden in plain sight for generations. When you touch your navel in silence, with your eyes closed and your breath deep and intentional, something remarkable happens. You're not just touching skin or tissue. You're making contact with a point of memory that goes back to your very beginning. This is where your journey in physical form started, where the connection between you and everything that nurtured you first established itself. And that memory doesn't live in your mind. It lives in your cells, in your energy field, in a place that words can't fully capture, but that your soul recognizes instantly. This isn't the kind of knowledge you'll find in traditional education or even in most spiritual books sitting on shelves. It's the kind of hidden truth that gets passed down quietly, almost secretly, between those who truly Understand its significance. There's a reason for that silence, for that discretion. Some wisdom is too powerful, too direct, too transformative to be shouted from rooftops. It has to be transmitted with love and reverence, person to person, heart to heart. But here's what makes this discovery so critical for your spiritual protection right now. The guides who worked with Cayce explained something that changes the entire game when it comes to understanding why some people seem constantly under spiritual attack while others move through life relatively untouched. They revealed that negative energies, the kind born from envy, anger, fear, and resentment, don't just float around randomly looking for any opening. They're actually drawn to specific entry points in the human energy system. And the very first place they attempt to attach themselves is right there at the umbilical region. If this kind of deep spiritual content speaks to you, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we're going to explore together about these hidden teachings and forgotten practices that can genuinely transform your life. Think about the impact of this revelation on how you approach spiritual protection. If you're trying to guard yourself but ignoring the primary entry point, you're essentially locking all the windows while leaving the front door wide open. This area functions as a vortex, a portal for energy reception. It's designed to receive, which means it's naturally receptive. And anything that's naturally receptive needs conscious protection, needs to be guarded with awareness and intention. The decision to protect this point isn't complicated or time-consuming. Cayce's instructions were beautifully simple, which is often the hallmark of truly powerful practices. Before you sleep each night, when your conscious mind is beginning to quiet down and your defenses are naturally lowering, place your right hand over your navel, not rushed, not as an afterthought, but with genuine presence. Close your eyes, breathe, and offer a sincere prayer from your heart. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be memorized or perfectly worded. In fact, the guides emphasize that elaborate language can actually get in the way of the real transmission happening. Something as simple as, "Lord, cover me with your light," is enough when it's felt genuinely, when it comes from that deep place inside you that knows it needs protection. The words themselves aren't the power. The power comes from the sincerity, from the conscious decision to engage with this portal and fill it with light before you enter the vulnerable state of sleep. What you're doing is creating an invisible shield that remains active through the night, a boundary that spiritual attacks simply cannot penetrate. Behind the scenes of physical reality, while you're sleeping and your conscious mind is offline, there's tremendous spiritual activity happening. Your energy field is more exposed, more open to influence. That's why so many people experience nightmares, wake up exhausted even after 8 hours of sleep, or feel like something drained them during the night. But when you implement this simple practice, you're essentially posting a guardian at the gate. Write in the comments, "My energy is protected," if you're feeling the truth of this. What happens next in this process is where things get even more fascinating, because the protection doesn't just work. During sleep, the protection extends into every moment of your day because you've fundamentally shifted something at the energetic level. But to understand why this works so powerfully, we need to talk about how spiritual communication actually functions, because this is where most people completely miss the mark in their spiritual practices. Here's a revelation that might transform your entire approach to prayer and protection. The spiritual realm doesn't operate through language the way we do. Spirit doesn't hear English or Portuguese or any human language. What spirit responds to, what it recognizes and interacts with, is vibration. It's the frequency of your intention, the resonance of your sincerity, the energetic signature of what you're truly feeling in that moment. You could recite the most beautiful, elaborate prayer you've ever heard, using perfect theological language, and if there's no genuine feeling behind it, If it's just words you memorized without heart, it creates almost no spiritual impact whatsoever. But when you place your hand on your navel with true presence, with real intention, even if you don't say a single word, the vibration speaks volumes. The navel, as your original point of connection to life itself, recognizes the language of love. It responds to sincere intention in ways that bypass all the mental complexity we tend to add to spiritual practice. This is why Cayce kept emphasizing simplicity. The elaborate formulations, the complicated rituals, the perfect sequences of words that we think we need, they're often just the ego trying to feel like it's doing something important. The real work happens in that space of genuine, heartfelt connection. Many people who are naturally sensitive, especially those with mediumistic abilities, already know something's happening in this area, even if they've never been taught about it directly. They report strange sensations in the belly region, feelings of something pulling or draining their energy, particularly after being in crowded places or around certain individuals. This isn't imagination or anxiety, though it's often dismissed as such. What's actually happening is that inferior spirits, entities operating on lower frequencies, are exploiting the natural sensitivity of this region to create energetic connections and literally feed off that person's life force. It's a hidden truth about the spiritual landscape that most people aren't aware of because they can't feel it happening. But for those who are energetically sensitive, this drainage can be absolutely exhausting, leading to chronic fatigue, unexplained emotional heaviness, and a constant sense that something's off, even when everything in their physical life seems fine. The good news, the truly empowering part of this understanding, is that this bridge can be severed. Through prayer, through consciously filling this area with light, through the sacred gesture of protection that Cayce taught, you can cut off access and seal that entry point. Now here's something crucial about implementing this practice in your own journey. Cayce was very specific that this should be done in secret, not because there's anything shameful or strange about it, but because performing it in silence without telling others, without seeking validation or approval, creates a different kind of spiritual potency. It becomes a silent covenant between you and the higher realms. There's no need for witnesses, no requirement for ritual objects or special settings or anyone else's participation or blessing. It's just you, your hand, your navel, and your faith. That's the complete formula. No middlemen, no complicated instructions, no expensive tools. This is the path of simplicity and truth that Cayce consistently pointed toward. And it's actually more powerful because of its simplicity, not in spite of it. When you keep this practice private, when you don't broadcast it or seek recognition for doing it, the energy stays concentrated, personal, and incredibly potent. Write in the comments, "I honor the silence," if this approach resonates with you. What's fascinating about this silent covenant is how it begins to reshape not just your spiritual defenses, but your entire relationship with the invisible forces that surround you constantly. Because something profound begins to happen when you commit to this practice consistently. It's not dramatic at first. You don't see fireworks or hear angelic choirs, but internally, gradually, unmistakably, something shifts. Your mind, which is usually racing with 1,000 thoughts and worries, begins to decelerate, not through force or effort, but naturally, as if it's finally found permission to slow down. Your body, which might have been holding tension in places you didn't even realize, starts to align itself. There's a sense of things falling into proper order, like puzzle pieces finally finding their correct positions. And your soul, that deepest part of you that often feels displaced in the chaos of modern life, begins to experience something it hasn't felt in a long time. It feels like it's coming home. This isn't metaphorical language trying to sound poetic. People who practice this consistently report an actual sensation of return, of reconnection with something essential they'd lost touch with. What's happening energetically is that the navel, when touched with genuine devotion and awareness, functions like a silent bell. When you ring a bell, it creates sound waves that travel outward. When you activate this point with sincere intention, it creates energetic waves that ripple into dimensions we can't perceive with ordinary senses. If something in this video resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a simple way to let me know this content is valuable to you, and it helps others who are searching for these truths find their way here too. These echoes reach into superior spiritual realms, signaling to forces of light that you're awake, that you're conscious, that you're actively participating in your own spiritual protection, and those forces respond. They've been waiting for you to remember, to turn your attention inward, to activate what's always been there. Now think about the journey of human knowledge and how much wisdom we've actually lost along the way. When we look at ancient cultures across the world, completely separated by geography and time, we find this fascinating pattern. The Egyptians, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Asian spiritual traditions, African healing systems, they all had practices involving the protection of the navel region. They wrapped it with special bands, placed sacred stones over it, spoke protective words over it. Modern minds tend to dismiss this as primitive superstition, as if we've somehow evolved beyond such simple practices. But here's the hidden truth behind those ancient decisions. They knew something we forgot. They understood that a guardian spirit dwells at this point, a sentinel placed there at the moment of your birth to watch over that energetic gateway. When you consciously activate this force through prayer and intention, when you acknowledge its presence and invite it to work on your behalf, something remarkable happens. Evil, negativity, lower vibrational forces, they simply dissolve in the presence of this activated protection. Not because you're fighting them or pushing them away, but because they can no longer find an opening through which to enter. The transformation in your daily experience can be profound. Situations that used to drain you don't have the same impact anymore. People who used to trigger your anxiety or anger somehow lose their power over your emotional state. The nightmares that plagued your sleep begin to fade. The unexplained heaviness you'd wake up with starts to lift. This isn't wishful thinking or placebo effect. It's the natural result of closing a vulnerability that was allowing constant spiritual interference. What we're really talking about here is spiritual amnesia, and it's one of the primary causes of the suffering epidemic we see in the modern world. When we forget who we truly are at the soul level, when we lose connection with where we came from and why we're here, when we stop knowing how to protect our own light, we become sitting ducks for every negative influence floating through the invisible realm. Write in the comments, I choose to remember if this is landing for you. The impact of this forgetting extends into every area of life, creating a cascade of problems that we then try to solve through external means while ignoring the spiritual root. We try to fix anxiety with medication, depression with therapy, relationship problems with better communication techniques, financial struggles with budgeting apps. All of these can be helpful tools, but when there's a spiritual component being completely ignored, we're essentially treating symptoms while the root cause continues operating undetected. How many times have you experienced that inexplicable tightness in your stomach, that nameless anxiety that seems to come out of nowhere? You check your circumstances and everything's relatively fine, yet there's this weight sitting right at your center, this pressure you can't explain or shake off. Most people assume it's stress or something they ate or just random physical discomfort. But what if I told you that many of these sensations actually originate in the spiritual field long before they manifest physically? The navel region receives these energetic intrusions before your conscious mind has any idea what's happening. It's like an early warning system that most of us have never been taught to read. Someone directs envy toward you from across the room and your stomach tightens. You walk into a space where there's been recent conflict, and that inexplicable heaviness settles right at your center. Your body is picking up signals from the invisible realm constantly, but because we've lost the knowledge of how to interpret and protect ourselves from these influences, we just suffer through them thinking something's wrong with us, physically or emotionally. What Edgar Cayce understood, and what modern science is only beginning to glimpse through studies of the body's electromagnetic field, is that this isn't just spiritual theory, it's energetic reality. The human body generates a measurable electromagnetic field that organizes itself around specific centers, and the navel is absolutely one of these crucial organizing points. When you touch this center with genuine consciousness, with real awareness of what you're doing, something tangible happens at the energetic level. You're not just going through a ritual or performing a symbolic gesture. You're actually reorganizing your energy field, creating coherence where there was chaos, establishing order where there was disorder. Think of it like this. Imagine your energy field as a room that's been ransacked, with things thrown everywhere, nothing in its proper place. That's what happens when you're constantly absorbing negative influences without any conscious protection. But when you place your hand on your navel with intention and prayer, it's like having an organizing force sweep through that room, putting everything back where it belongs, creating space to breathe again. The chaos that was creating that stomach tightness, that unexplained anxiety, that spiritual static, it begins to dispel itself naturally. Each time you engage in this practice, especially in that quiet moment before sleep when the world finally stops demanding your attention, you're doing something profoundly powerful. You're reigniting a spiritual candle within yourself, not a metaphorical candle, but an actual energetic flame that burns at your core. This flame might be small at first, barely noticeable, discreet in its presence, but it's firm, steady, and it grows with consistent practice. What's beautiful about this inner flame is how it doesn't stay contained. It propagates outward, radiating through your entire energy field, illuminating areas that have been dark for far too long. Your mind, which might have been clouded with confusion or negativity, begins to strengthen and clarify. Shadows that have been lurking in your consciousness, feeding doubt and fear, start to dissipate simply because light is now present where it wasn't before. And peace, that elusive sense of peace that so many people chase through countless external solutions, begins to awaken naturally from within your entire being. Write in the comments, "My inner light is growing," if you're feeling this shift happening. What makes this transformation so sustainable is that you're not depending on anything outside yourself anymore. You're not running from spiritual center to spiritual center hoping someone else has the answer to your problems. You're not waiting for the perfect healer or teacher or guru to finally tell you the magic words that will relieve your pain. That entire approach keeps you in a state of dependency, always seeking externally for something that can only be found internally. The real transformation happens when you realize that the answer has been with you since the very beginning, literally located at your body's center where your entire physical journey started. The navel is your altar. The prayer you speak there is your fire, and you are the priest of your own spiritual temple. This shift in mindset from spiritual consumer to spiritual sovereign changes everything about how you move through the world. You stop giving your power away to systems and structures and other people's interpretations of what you need. You step into the truth that you are equipped, you are capable, you are divinely designed with everything necessary for your own protection and spiritual well-being. When people would ask Cayce why the navel specifically Why not some other point on the body? His answer was beautifully simple and impossible to argue with. Because that's where life began. That's where the most profound connection you've ever experienced formed, the connection with your mother that sustained you before you could sustain yourself. For 9 months, everything you needed to exist flowed through that singular point of contact. Can you think of any other location on your body with that kind of fundamental significance? Spiritually, this isn't just about biological history. This point represents the bridge between the material world you're living in right now and the invisible plane you came from. It's the beginning of everything for you in this particular incarnation, the origin point of your existence in physical form. When you honor that point, when you consciously work with it, you're tapping into something far deeper than just a physical memory. You're engaging with the very architecture of how spirit interfaces with matter. The reconnection process that happens when you actually practice this is unlike anything else in spiritual work. When your hand rests upon your navel in genuine silence, not rushed, not distracted, not multitasking, something shifts immediately. Your soul, which has been agitated by the constant demands and noise of modern life, begins to calm. There's this palpable sense of settling, like turbulent water becoming still. The touch itself reconnects circuits that were disconnected, pathways that were closed off. Your prayer, whether it's words or just sincere intention, penetrates to depths that surface-level spiritual practices never reach. And your spirit, that core of who you really are beneath all the conditioning and roles and identities, begins to hear what the world's constant noise has been drowning out. This isn't magic in the sense of something supernatural or outside natural law. It's communion, which is actually far more powerful than magic. It's a reunion with a center that has always been active, always been there, patiently waiting for the moment you would finally wake up and remember it exists. Behind the scenes of your daily consciousness, this center has been operating your entire life, receiving signals, processing information, interacting with forces you can't see. The only question has been whether you were aware of it and working with it consciously, or whether it was operating completely outside your awareness. Write in the comments, "I'm reconnecting with my center," if this journey is resonating with you. What happens when you maintain this practice over time isn't just about protection anymore. It becomes about something much more profound. It becomes about fundamentally restructuring your relationship with reality itself, with who you are at the deepest level. Here's something important to understand as you begin implementing this practice in your own life. You might not see dramatic results on day 1 or even day 7. You might place your hand on your navel, say your prayer, and feel absolutely nothing. No tingling, no visions, no sudden rush of peace. And that's exactly when most people give up, deciding it doesn't work for them or that they're doing it wrong. But the invisible realm operates on a completely different timeline than our impatient modern minds expect. The spiritual forces responding to your practice are patient, infinitely patient. And your inner light, that flame you're reigniting, doesn't explode into existence all at once. It grows gradually, steadily, building strength with each conscious touch, each sincere prayer. What's happening in those early days when you think nothing is changing is that foundations are being laid, energy patterns are being rewired, and spiritual agreements are being established. The impact isn't always immediately visible, but it's absolutely real. With persistent practice, something remarkable begins to emerge. You'll start noticing that protection is happening even before you consciously ask for it. You'll walk into situations that would have normally drained you, and somehow you remain centered. You'll encounter people who used to trigger your anxiety, and they barely register. Your energy field has learned the new pattern, has absorbed the lesson, and is now responding automatically to protect you. This is the transformation from conscious practice to integrated reality. There's an entire world existing within you right now, waiting for this sacred touch to activate it. Not to stroke your ego or make you feel superior to others, but to remind you of a fundamental truth that modern life systematically erases. You are not alone in this journey. You are not just flesh struggling through a random universe. You are energy, you are light, you are connected to forces of love and protection that are always present, always available, always responsive to your sincere call. When you protect your navel through this practice, you're not just creating a shield for the present moment. You're protecting your entire history, every experience that shaped you, every lesson your soul came here to learn. You're protecting your path forward, ensuring that your decisions come from clarity rather than interference. And you're protecting your spirit itself from the constant barrage of negative influences that would love nothing more than to dim your light and keep you confused. The modern world has become masterful at one thing above all else, distancing us from ourselves. Through endless distractions, manufactured urgencies, constant noise demanding our attention, we're pulled further and further away from our own center. We become strangers to ourselves, living on autopilot, reacting rather than responding, scattered rather than centered. But the moment you place your hand on your navel with genuine intention, something extraordinary happens. Everything silences, not just external noise, but the internal chatter that never seems to stop. Time itself seems to bend, to slow down, to become less tyrannical. Your soul, which has been wandering lost in the chaos, finds its way back home, and you feel, even if you can't articulate it in words, this profound sense of arrival. I am here, I am whole, I am protected. Write in the comments, I am coming home to myself, if this truth is reaching you. What's fascinating about this practice is how it creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond just the moment of prayer itself, because the practice begins to reshape how you show up in every area of your life, how you make decisions, how you interact with others, how you navigate challenges. It's like you've been trying to grow something beautiful in soil that was completely depleted, wondering why nothing was thriving despite all your efforts. This practice is like finally watering a plant you forgot existed, one that's been struggling in dry, hardened earth. In those first days of consistent practice, it might feel like you're pouring water into ground so parched that nothing could possibly still be alive beneath the surface. The soil seems impenetrable, lifeless, resistant to change. But if you persist, if you keep showing up with that simple gesture night after night, something remarkable begins to happen. A subtle warmth starts radiating from that point. You might notice a sense of relief washing over you that you can't quite explain. There's a brightness that appears in your eyes that others might comment on without understanding where it came from. What's happening is that the invisible realm, those forces of light and protection that have always been present, are responding with incredible sweetness to your persistence and faith. They're not demanding perfection from you. They're not requiring elaborate rituals or years of study. They're simply honoring your sincere effort, your decision to remember, your willingness to reconnect. The real secret behind why this practice works so powerfully was something Cayce emphasized repeatedly throughout his work. The power isn't in the complexity. It's not in how perfectly you perform the gesture or how eloquently you phrase your prayer. The secret lies entirely in purity of intention, not in form, not in technique, but in surrender. When you approach this practice with a heart that's genuinely open, with real vulnerability and truth, the invisible realm bows before that. Simplicity. Think about that for a moment. Forces that we might consider infinitely more powerful than ourselves, spiritual presences that exist in dimensions we can barely conceive. They respond most profoundly to the simplest, most heartfelt gesture. When your action is born from the heart, rather than from ego or obligation, or the desire to impress, it crosses dimensions instantly. It touches the heart of God directly, without any intermediary, without any complicated process. This is the hidden truth about spiritual power that religions and institutions often complicate, because simplicity doesn't create dependency. So here's how you actually implement this in a way that honors both the practice and your own journey. At night, before you surrender to sleep, create a moment of sacred space. Turn everything off, not just your phone and devices, but the mental noise, the replaying of the day's problems, the planning for tomorrow. Just lie down in your bed, breathe deeply, and bring your hand to your navel as if you're touching a sacred relic, because that's exactly what it is. Close your eyes and allow yourself to drop into that space of genuine presence. Then, with all the sincerity you can muster, say something as simple as this: I am here, Lord. Protect my soul. Illuminate my path. You don't need to memorize these exact words. They're just a template. What matters infinitely more than the specific language is that you feel it with truth, with genuine intention behind every syllable. Write in the comments, I surrender to simplicity, if this approach feels right for your soul. What begins to unfold from this consistent nightly practice is a complete reorganization of not just your spiritual defenses, but your entire consciousness. The way your relationship with fear transforms, how you start recognizing which emotions are genuinely yours and which ones you're absorbing from the environment around you. And here's something beautiful that validates this entire practice in a way that should silence any remaining skepticism you might have. Watch children when they're afraid or uncertain. Without anyone teaching them, without reading any spiritual texts or attending any workshops, they instinctively place their hands on their belly. When they're scared at night, their hand naturally gravitates to that center point. When they sleep, many children rest with their hand over their navel. They didn't learn this behavior from anyone. They remember it because their spirit is still awake in them, still connected to truths that adults have forgotten through years of conditioning and disconnection. This protection isn't something we invented or discovered. It's an inheritance of the soul, passed down through generations, not through words, but through cellular memory, through the wisdom that exists in our bodies before our minds learn to override it. Children operate from this instinctive knowing until the world trains them to ignore it, to dismiss such simple gestures as meaningless. But what if we stopped dismissing what children naturally know and started remembering it for ourselves? One of the most liberating revelations that comes from maintaining this practice is understanding the true nature of the fear that often grips us without warning. Much of the anxiety and dread you experience on a daily basis isn't actually yours. It's emotional debris floating through the collective consciousness, fear generated by others that you're unknowingly absorbing because you lack spiritual anchoring. When you're not grounded in your own center, when that navel point isn't consciously protected, you become like a sponge, soaking up everything in your environment. The person next to you on the train is anxious, and suddenly you feel anxious. Your co-worker is carrying rage from an argument at home, and without understanding why, you feel irritated. This isn't empathy or sensitivity as a gift. It's unprotected absorption, and it's exhausting. But when you touch your navel with faith and intention, when you activate that center point consciously, you're essentially sending a signal to the invisible realm. You're declaring, not here. This space is protected. Here is light, and the impact of that declaration is immediate at the energetic level. Your body registers the shift and begins operating differently. Your spirit responds by tightening the boundaries of your energy field. The vibration of your entire being reorganizes itself around this new pattern of protection. And lower frequencies, those emotional energies that used to pass right through you and take up residence, suddenly can't find purchase anymore. They bounce off instead of penetrating. Now here's where the transformation becomes undeniable even to the most skeptical mind. You might not see anything dramatic happening. You're not going to wake up one morning to angels singing or visions of light. But pay attention to the subtle changes. You begin sleeping more deeply, more peacefully. Your dreams shift in quality, becoming clearer, sometimes even carrying messages or guidance. You wake up feeling lighter, more restored, as if your night of rest actually restored you, instead of leaving you somehow more depleted than when you went to bed. The energy in your environment starts to shift in ways others might notice before you do. People comment that you seem different, calmer, more centered. What's happening behind the scenes is that you've reactivated a guardian that's been sleeping at your body's center since birth, waiting for this precise moment of conscious engagement. Write in the comments, "My guardian is awake," if you're beginning to sense this shift. This guardian doesn't rest, doesn't take breaks, doesn't need your constant attention once activated. It simply maintains a protective field continuously, working on your behalf 24 hours a day once you've established that conscious connection through consistent practice. Now, I want to address something that might be happening for some of you watching this. There's likely a part of your mind that's resisting, maybe even mocking this practice as too simple, too basic, perhaps even foolish. That's the ego talking, and the ego has very specific reasons for dismissing anything this straightforward. Because if spiritual protection and transformation were really this accessible, if it didn't require expensive courses or special initiations or years of complicated study, then the ego loses its ability to make you feel inadequate or keep you searching endlessly outside yourself. But here's a question worth asking those who mock such simple practices. How many of them actually sleep in genuine peace? How many feel authentic security in their daily lives? How many have found what they're looking for through all their sophisticated approaches and complex philosophies? What appears too simple for the ego to take seriously is often too profound for the spirit to ignore. Cayce understood this paradox perfectly and taught it consistently throughout his work. True faith isn't impressive or showy. It's humble, unpretentious, and accessible to anyone regardless of education or status. The real power of this practice reveals itself especially on your difficult days, those moments when life feels overwhelming and you're struggling just to keep your head above water. That's precisely when you need to touch your navel. When anguish rises in your chest, when anxiety starts spiraling, when fear threatens to consume you, bring your hand to that center point. Breathe deeply and pray, even if your prayer is nothing more than a silent cry for help. This simple gesture becomes your anchor in the storm, your interior home that remains standing no matter what chaos surrounds you externally. This is the place where spirit meets body and has an actual conversation, where the invisible part of you reassures the visible part with a message that bypasses all doubt. We are together. I sustain you. I protect you. That message doesn't come through words you hear with your ears. It comes through a knowing that settles into your bones, a certainty that emerges from a place deeper than thought. What we're really talking about here is a complete shift in how you understand spiritual practice itself. So much of organized spirituality, whether religious or New Age, creates systems of dependency. You need to go to this building, consult with that person, perform these specific rituals, buy these particular tools. And yes, communities and teachers and sacred spaces can all be valuable supports on the journey. But superior spirituality, the kind of wisdom that Cayce channeled from the highest sources, doesn't want you dependent on external structures. The true temple isn't a building you visit or a group you join. The true temple is you, your body, your consciousness, your direct connection to the divine. When this truth finally lands in your awareness, when you really understand that you are the temple and the priest and the altar all in one, everything changes. Your practice stops being something you do to get somewhere and becomes the path itself. Your prayer stops being a request sent to some distant authority and becomes a bridge you build between dimensions. And your hand resting on your navel stops being just a gesture and becomes a sword of light, cutting through every illusion that tries to convince you you're powerless. Write in the comments, "I am the temple," if this truth is awakening something in you. What makes this realization so transformative is how it fundamentally alters your relationship with spiritual authority and where you locate the source of your own power. Because once you stop looking outside for validation and permission, once you recognize that you carry divine connection within your own being, the entire game changes. You're no longer vulnerable in the same way, no longer searching desperately for someone else to fix what only you can address. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in the invisible realm when you engage this practice consistently, because understanding the mechanics makes the impact even more powerful. When an inferior spirit, a lower vibrational entity, attempts to approach your energy field, it's not doing so randomly. These forces are intelligent in their own way, strategic even. They're constantly scanning for breaches in your spiritual defenses, looking for weak points where they can establish a connection and begin draining your energy or influencing your thoughts and emotions. What are they searching for specifically? Disorganized emotions that create static in your field. Repetitive negative thought patterns that act like homing beacons, unprotected energy centers that are essentially unlocked doors. And the navel, if completely forgotten and ignored as most people's are, becomes the primary entry point. It's the path of least resistance, the place where your defenses are naturally thinnest because you've never been taught to guard it. But here's where your conscious decision to engage this practice changes everything at the energetic level. When that navel point is protected through consistent prayer and intention, when it's cared for with genuine faith, it transforms from a vulnerability into a fortress wall. It becomes a concentrated point of light that lower vibrational forces literally cannot bear to approach, not because you're fighting them or engaged in some spiritual battle, but simply because light and darkness cannot occupy the same space. Your conscious protection creates a frequency that repels what once had easy access. Think of your navel as a key, not metaphorically, but functionally, and your prayer, your sincere intention, is the hand that turns this key. When you engage this practice with real presence, what you're opening isn't a physical door you can see or touch. You're opening an energetic portal between your current state of consciousness and higher dimensions of experience. And when you step through that portal, even if you can't see or fully understand what's happening, the transformation is immediate and real. Fear that once dominated your internal landscape suddenly yields space to confidence. Pain that seemed permanent begins to transform into something more manageable, even meaningful. Darkness that felt overwhelming gives way to light, not all at once. In some dramatic revelation, but gradually, steadily, with each sincere engagement with this practice. The journey isn't about destination, but about direction. And each time you turn that key, you're moving in the right direction. Here's something crucial that Cayce emphasized repeatedly, and it goes against our modern impulse to share everything we're doing on social media or with our friends. Don't tell anyone about this practice. Don't seek approval or validation. Don't turn it into a performance or a topic of conversation meant to impress others with your spiritual sophistication. This practice isn't spectacle, it's communion, sacred and private. It's a secret kept between you and the higher realms, and there's tremendous power in that secrecy. As Cayce always taught, do it in silence, because it's in silence that the spirit actually listens. It's in silence that heaven responds with guidance that words would only obscure. Write in the comments, I embrace the sacred silence. If this resonates with your soul, what happens when you maintain this silent practice over weeks and months is a complete reorganization of not just your spiritual defenses, but your entire way of being in the world. Because you're building something that external circumstances simply cannot touch or destroy. No matter what chaos erupts in the world around you, no matter what challenges or crises appear on your doorstep, you can maintain an inner peace that seems impossible to those who haven't discovered this secret. Your temple stands firm not because you built it with impressive rituals or expensive spiritual tools, but because you established it with the most powerful materials available: hands of faith, simple gesture, and profound silence. Think about the impact of this truth on how you navigate life's inevitable storms. No spiritual earthquake, no matter how violent, can topple an altar that's been built within your own heart with sincere devotion. External temples can crumble. Physical structures can be destroyed. But what you've constructed through this practice exists in a dimension that disaster cannot reach. This is the hidden truth about real spiritual security that most people spend their entire lives searching for in all the wrong places. Here's a shift in mindset that changes everything once it fully lands in your consciousness. You're not a victim of spiritual attack. You're not weak or cursed or inherently vulnerable. You were simply disconnected from your center, operating without awareness of the power you carry within yourself. But now, with each sincere prayer over your navel, with each conscious touch to that sacred point, you're actively reconnecting with the source of all protection, all strength, all light. And this source isn't something that can run dry or become depleted. It doesn't depend on your circumstances or your past mistakes or whether you've been perfect in your spiritual practice. This source flows eternally because it comes from above, from dimensions of pure love that are infinite and inexhaustible. Every time you engage this practice, you're plugging back into that infinite supply, recharging your spiritual batteries in ways that no amount of rest or vacation could ever accomplish. What most people don't realize is that the navel holds a memory far deeper than just your biological beginning. Yes, it's where your physical body first received nourishment, but it's also a memory of the soul itself. It's the point where your spirit decided to anchor into physical form, where the invisible became visible, where eternity touched time. This is where connection begins at the most fundamental level, and remarkably, it's where connection can recommence no matter how long you've been disconnected. When you pray at this point with genuine awareness of what you're doing, you're engaging in something far more profound than simply asking for protection from negative forces. You're making a declaration to the entire universe, to all the invisible realms, to the divine intelligence that orchestrates existence. You're saying, I remember who I am. I reunite with my true self. I choose to illuminate my own path. That declaration shifts everything about how spiritual forces interact with you, because you're no longer operating as a passive recipient, but as a conscious co-creator. And here's where it all comes together in a way that should fill you with both reverence and excitement, where your physical life began at that exact point on your body that marks your entrance into this world. Your true spiritual protection now also begins. In the very center of your being, a new altar has been lit through your consistent practice. This isn't just routine or habit. This is love made manifest, divine intelligence responding to your sincere call. Write in the comments, "My altar is lit," if you're feeling this awakening. What Cayce understood, and what you're now beginning to experience, is that carrying this sacred secret properly means doing exactly what he taught. Practicing in silence, maintaining faith even when you see nothing immediate, and surrendering to the simplicity of it all. Because when the soul speaks softly, with genuine devotion rather than desperate pleading, All of heaven leans in to listen. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's how the spiritual realm actually operates. So if you've made it this far in the video, you're clearly someone who recognizes that there's more to reality than what we can see with our physical eyes. You're someone seeking genuine transformation, not just surface-level comfort or temporary fixes. And that's exactly why I create content like this, to share these hidden truths that most people either don't know about or have forgotten along the way. If this resonated with you, if something in this message touched that deep knowing inside you that recognizes truth when it hears it, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together, so many other forgotten practices and spiritual insights that can completely shift how you experience life. And honestly, having you here as part of this community means we're all lifting each other up just by seeking truth together. Leave a comment below saying, "This message found me," so I know you were here, that you stayed until the end and received what you needed to hear today. That small gesture of acknowledgement creates a beautiful, energetic connection between all of us who are on this path. And if you feel moved to hit that like button, it's a simple way to let me know this content is serving you and helps more people who need to hear this find their way here. Now, there's a video right here that goes even deeper into Edgar Cayce's teachings on spiritual protection and energy work. It complements everything we talked about today perfectly. Click on it and continue with me over there, because the journey we started together doesn't have to end here. Until next time, remember, your protection begins where your life began. Touch it with faith, guard it with silence, and trust that you're never alone in this.